Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to Star Trek Prodigy, a ReBinge It podcast. My name is James.
And my name is Kim. And together, we're watching and overanalyzing every episode of Star Trek Prodigy, like true Star Trek geeks. Hit it. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are on Season 1, Episode 13. All the World's a Stage. This episode began streaming November 10th, 2022. The Paramount Plus description is, the crew answers a distress call to find a colony trapped in Starfleet's past.
And I will just say this up front before we get started. I was very disappointed that it wasn't Dramatis Personae Part 2.
Oh, because you thought it was going to be a play. I get it.
Yes, one of the best Star Trek Deep Space Nine episodes, in my opinion.
Yes, your favorite for sure. I was disappointed there wasn't time travel.
Oh, time travel.
That's what I thought it meant. Well, we are recording a little bit late this week, as it's been a busy week. So we are recording on Saturday morning today. So we are a little out of sorts, but I think we should get started.
Yeah, I managed to find the podcast booth, so that's good. That's a good start.
You haven't had as many cups of coffee as normal. I've had my coffee, so I'm ready to go.
Okay, well, let's get underway.
Yep.
We open on the Dauntless, with Janeway questioning the diviner about the Protostar.
He seemed surprisingly lucid for being driven mad by Zero.
I was just worried he was going to immediately start with the lies.
Well, yeah, for sure, but I would have expected that he wouldn't be able to speak in complete sentences and really be lost and not even be able to understand questions being asked of him. So far, he's not showing that he's that mad.
Yeah. Well, he mumbles about the ship and says that they stole my daughter. When Janeway shows him a picture of Chakotay, he says he was taken prisoner.
I noticed he didn't bother to say, oh, I did that, or, oh, my robot Dreadnought did that. Ha ha.
That was me.
That was me. Yeah, he left that part out.
The diviner says his mind is in pieces, and we see flashes of Solum in flames, and he again mentions the mission. He then seems to badly react to Janeway's Starfleet badge, and we see a flash of Gwyn wearing the badge.
Yeah, PTSD.
He shouts, "The atrocities, the intrusion," and then goes into neural shock, and Dr. Noam says he needs rest and knocks him out. That must be that medical genius in action again. He just sedates him.
Just knock him out. I think you should always just start Dr. Noam's name with obnoxious.
Oh, maybe medical genius, Dr. Noam.
Oh, yeah, that's better. Well, now Ensign Tahani reports.
That's not her name.
They found the escape pod from the comms relay station, but Barnus Frex is missing. He was rescued by an unidentified vessel. And Janeway's all concerned now, and she says her rescue mission is now a manhunt.
Or a person hunt.
Right. But don't get too comfy on the Dauntless, because we aren't coming back here in this episode.
Oh.
Yeah, disappointing.
Yeah.
Now we go to the Protostar, and Dal is recording a log about the disappointment of not being able to go to Starfleet. We see Pog being very frustrated by the living construct, the weapon that we found last week.
Yep.
Phasers and transporters have no effect on it. It just keeps adapting like it's a Borg. And Pog mutters something about stupid futuristic weaponry.
I feel Pog's frustration here.
Oh, yeah. We learn that even opening a hail to Starfleet is dangerous, so that's very convenient for the story. But for now, they're just going to do as much good as they can.
They find an M-class planet emitting a distress call. On the planet, there is a subspace distortion field causing lots of trouble with the sensors, but they do find life signs. Also, we find Rock looking after Murph, who appears to be in a little cat bed. Murph continues to be unwell, and the, of course, sweethearted Rock is worried about him. The rest of the crew decides to go on the mission without her. Jankum fakes a cough and suggests that he stays behind, he's too ill. But Dal isn't having any of it.
Yeah, he's like...
Yes.
Now they beam down to a very lush planet, and the tricorders aren't working well because of the interference, of course. But they do quickly bump into two dudes in some very old-school, cobbled-together Starfleet uniforms. They also have an original series phaser, which they used to stun Jankum. And then they call our crew the StarFlight landing party, and they're very excited to see them once the shock has worn off.
Oh, I love these uniforms. I think they would make an awesome cosplay, even down to like the really large stitching, because they're very rough and ready.
Yeah, they have sort of a Frankenstein look of the way they've put them together. I'm not exactly sure why, but you could absolutely make that cosplay and people would know immediately what it was.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, one of these two guys is called Sulu and the other JamesT. So we know pretty quickly that we're in for some TOS references.
Yes.
Holo Janeway tells them there's been no Starfleet ship near this sector in over 100 years. So she says they're not really Starfleet, which honestly, I think we could tell just by looking at them.
Well, this race is very excited that someone finally answered the call of Ensign. The JamesT guy is absolutely putting on a Kirk parody here. It's very funny.
Yes.
He then pulls out an old school communicator, the classic Star Trek type with the flip up lid that does the beeping noise, and does a slightly wonky Vulcan salute saying, "Live logs and proper." Literally, he says that.
And their Vulcan salute, they have their two middle fingers together instead of apart.
It's close. It's close.
It's very hard to do if you try to copy that.
Well, they then introduce the crew to the new Enterprise, which is a building kind of moderately shaped like a starship. And just like the uniforms, it's a little rough and ready.
Yeah. Inside the building, there are many aliens all wearing the exact same green makeshift uniforms.
Yes.
Like they didn't put any different colors at all. And there's also a large statue of someone in a red shirt, but we don't see the face of the statue. The shirts also that the guys are wearing, they have sort of an uneven front, which is a lot like the Kirk shirt that sort of had the sweep across.
Yeah,
and it didn't have a flat bottom as well. I thought that was funny, and I think very specific, because that shirt, there's a lot of contention about whether or not that was gold or green. The modern TVs, it's very green, I'm pretty sure that was a reference to that.
That's a good way of doing it, yes.
Yeah.
Well, some of the aliens seem to be sort of training and fighting, and they're doing the classic original series double-fisted punch.
Oh, yeah.
Zero thinks they are being sincere, and Jankum makes fun of them for playing dress-up and pretending to be Federation. Of course, that's kind of exactly what the crew is doing.
Yeah, that stings Dal a little bit when he says that.
Now we meet Dr. Boons, and JamesT says, "They must hear the logs."
They must hear the logs.
Yes, just like that.
It's very much a parody.
He says, "We've stayed prepared and kept them word for word." He calls everyone to the bridge, and now you think we're in for some historical documents like Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
But instead, the aliens put on a play, which has some of the elements of a classic TOS show. The sound effects, the makeshift-looking Enterprise bridge, all low-budget sets for sure.
Yeah. It's almost like you were putting on a little play in your garage using cardboard boxes.
Oh, yes. That's exactly it, yes.
And now Jankum is in the front row with like a bucket of popcorn. It's so funny.
He knows how to enjoy himself.
And when the play starts, we hear about a great ship exploring the cosmos, captained by JamesT, the warrior, and First Officer, Mr. Sprok. So they're just close with everything, but they don't have it quite right. And then they all rock back and forth like they're on a ship that's being attacked. And JamesT says, and then they found our world. And someone with a Scottish accent comes out saying, there are people below who need a hero, but we cannot interfere. And then the guy playing Kirk, now he like jumps over the console and he says, now he is Ensign, bearer of crimson, and he is the bravest.
And the crimsons are usually the deadest too.
Yeah, I don't know why he has to be both Kirk and Ensign. This guy obviously has the big ego, so I guess that's why.
Well, he takes all the good roles.
Yeah. So Ensign fell from the stars, and he's on a table pretending like he's falling. And he says, he brought the ways of Starflight, but also a warning. He says a great evil followed him, and he warns everyone not to enter the woods, or your land will be cursed by the gallows. Everyone gasps in the crowd and mutters, even though they've seen this 1,000 times.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
And then part of the drama, there's people going into the woods and never returning. And also we learn of a sickness that appeared in the village. And Ensign spent his final months here teaching us what he could. He promised one day Starflight would come and rid us of the evil. And we've waited for generations. That's the play.
Well, Dal's first reaction is to head out.
Yeah.
He can see the civilization was not ready for first contact. And he says they are living a lie and don't know it, just like us.
Yeah.
He's really feeling it here.
Really stung him, this whole thing.
Then Cadet Huur'A stumbled into the Enterprise village with a rash on her face, and she's coughing and weak. Dal catches her, and she says she went into the woods and saw the gallows. It had 2 glowing eyes and was breathing fire.
Yeah, scary.
Dal tries to say curses don't exist, But then he sees he also has this black rash on his arms.
Yeah.
Zero, meanwhile, is attempting to determine the cause. Jankum Pog starts shouting about how the Chris is evil and begins hiding behind boxes.
I love it when he's going, it's because it's evil.
Yeah, he seems to be freaking out just a little bit.
Well, he was the one eating popcorn in the front row, so of course he's very into the drama of this story.
Oh, yeah. Zero tells them they can synthesize a cure, but they need to know the cause. So Gwyn says we need to find the gallows.
We go back up to the Protostar from here, and Rock is very distraught over Murph being sick. But Gwyn calls saying that they need her to bring down some medical supplies and EV suits because Dal needs help. So Rock asks Janeway to look after Murph. And then Rock, Gwyn, and Jankum head into the woods in their protective suits. And I do really like that one of the protective suits is big enough for Rock because, she's she's quite large. And then we go back to, I want to say sickbay on the Enterprise, but it's just a room.
It's sickbay. We'll stick with their cultural wishes.
Okay. And we see Uhura, who says she wanted to bravely explore, like what Ensign taught, and help the helpless. Dal asks Zero if they've ever synthesized an antidote before, and Z says, no, but I've skimmed the manual.
I totally read the manual. I'm down with this.
And this is like freaking Dal out. And also his skin is itching and he's very uncomfortable. And then one of the aliens puts a wood leech on Dal's neck and suddenly he feels better.
He's drugged.
They found that the leech's secretions reduce the angiodemic immune response. So even though this group clearly got anything futuristic from Ensign, they still are able to have some remedies for things.
Yeah.
Dr. Boons can see that Dal isn't very comfortable with what's going on, and he tells him a story about how Ensign had told his ancestors about the Prime Directive and how this civilization wasn't really ready for interference from Starflight. He says he knows that they're not Starflight, but he also says you don't need a real ship to believe in what it stands for, which seems like an important lesson.
Yes.
And then we see Ensign's tattered red shirt and phaser in a display case on the wall. He asks Dal if he believes in what it stands for, which really makes Dal stop and think.
Which is an interesting tie back because that's what really the last couple of episodes have been about.
Yeah, you don't need to be in Starfleet in order to believe in their ideals and to act them out and to live up to them.
Yeah, to follow their principles.
Yeah.
Out in the woods, the crew has found the poisoned land and they hear what sounds like growling and the ground shakes.
Yeah.
They find a cave and ominously light emitting from it.
Yeah.
Jankum wonders why are they walking towards this cave with the ominous glowing light, and Jankum is afraid. But Gwen replies, I learned never to fear the truth. Yeah, that was kind of a hard lesson for her, that one.
Yeah.
As we walk through the cave, it seems to be full of dilithium crystals, and we can hear and see explosions and green clouds of gas. There are falling rocks, and eventually they find the gallows, which turns out is an old TOS-era shuttle called the Galileo.
Yeah. Rock realizes pretty quickly that the damaged warp engine is what's causing the subspace interference, and also the leaking plasma is poisoning the land and causing the rumbles and explosions. The plasma is reacting badly to all the dilithium in this cave.
Yeah.
They try to call Zero so that they can work on the antidote, but comms are not working because of the damaged shuttle. So Jankum says he's been studying 23rd century Starfleet ships, and he knows the shuttle is equipped with a duotronic comm relay. But if the shuttle falls off the cliff that it's perched on, it could cause quite an explosion. But Pog says if we come across one more thing that Pog can't fix, he can't call himself an engineer. And then he tells the others, if this goes sideways, promise me a royal Tellarite funeral. And he bravely jumps into the shuttle.
That's very JamesT kind of thing.
Yeah.
As JamesT would say.
Yeah.
Back at the alien village, or Enterprise, Dal and Huur'A are in big trouble. They're not getting any better, and it's all getting worse. Jankum finally manages to get the call through to Zero and describes what they found, which gives Zero enough information to synthesize an antidote. And in about 10 seconds, everyone is cured. Dal wakes up and shouts, I'm alive!
I'm alive! And so are you!
A little diversion into Scrooged. Jankum says they need to get us out of there because we won't last much longer. But Janeway can get a lock on the ship and needs to be closer. Flying that close to the distortion field will knock out the autopilot and Janeway, so they need a crew on board. Dal looks at the aliens and says, let's go. And we beam some greenies to the ship. Janeway is skeptical, but Dal says to trust him. You just have to believe. They alter the bridge controls so they look like an original TOS bridge. And the aliens are happy. They can now work with this. Huur'A says, "This I know."
And I don't remember if it was you or me, but one of us says, "It's a Unix system."
Yes.
I'm a little suspicious of how these people are going to know how to fly a Starfleet ship. I mean, Dal says you just have to believe, but I don't think that's really enough to turn people into navigators, engineers.
I think Ensign taught them everything they know.
Well, clearly. Back in the cave now, they all jump into the shuttle to avoid the falling rocks, but this thing is not in a very safe place either. And then somehow they trigger Ensign Garavik giving his last log. And he had tried to do his duty by saving the locals from the danger of his crashed ship. But they welcomed him, healed him, gave him hope when he had none. And in the end, they were the ones that saved me.
Meanwhile, the Protostar is blasting through the rocks to save the crew members. The shuttle starts to fall towards the plasma pool of death, but we beam them out just in time.
Of course.
Rescued, they now return to the village, and the green locals all get a view of the Protostar as it easily lands at their front door.
Probably causing more environmental damage.
Yes. Now Dal does a supplemental log saying how people can sometimes surprise you, and this is like a new chapter of Starfleet. And we see Huur'A adjusting her Vulcan salute to be correct.
Hello Janeway says the rules of second contact are a bit fuzzy, so it's up to them how they want to evolve. Maybe they needed to watch Star Trek Lower Decks to learn more about second contact.
Hand wave, hand wave.
Then they help them seal up the cave, so now the plasma is, just poisoning the groundwater.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they should have done something
they need
else.
to do more remedial work here to clean up the toxic waste.
I'm going to hope that they did, and we just didn't see it all, because it wouldn't have been great for a 30-minute show to spend a lot of time on that. But yes, I certainly hope so. I hope they tried to clean up all the plasma or something.
Yeah.
They also leave them some medical supplies. And then we see that they've made updates to the log or to the play, and we see it includes Jankum now, which is great. I'm sure Jankum's going to love that.
Oh, Jankum is going to love that. He'll be so happy.
Yeah. Dal says if we can't take the ship to Starfleet, we'll find another way. So to end the episode, Rok-Tahk goes to check on Murph. She doesn't find Murph. Instead, she finds a blue and purple cocoon on the wall, and you can hear Murph kind of cooing.
Yes.
Oh, the end. All right, let's talk about what stood out in the episode for us. You want to go first?
Okay, first off, how on earth do you keep on figuring out these plot points? You've been doing it on Deep Space Nine. You're doing it here. How did you figure out Murph was going into a metamorphosis?
Well, I guess I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I mean, I am watching these shows a lot. And at the end of the day, they are kid stories. And so there are maybe just some basic principles of kid stories. But when they made a point of saying Murph was not feeling well or had a cold, you knew it wasn't that. You knew Murph didn't have a cold, because then they would have made the cold sort of the joke in the story, but they didn't do that. So they were just trying to hint at something else. And it just made perfect sense that it would be a worm that would go into some kind of a cocoon. I was expecting this to happen right from the beginning of this episode. So I don't know. It just seemed logical to me.
I'm still betting it'll turn into Wesley Crusher.
I don't think it's going to turn into Wesley Crusher. I am concerned about what it's going to turn into, because I think Murph has become so popular and he's very cute, and there are already toys and things. Are they really going to change it that dramatically? I was wondering if he was just going to come out as a bigger Murph or a smaller Murph or something and be exactly the same. Or maybe he'll just change color. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
He might turn into an alien, a xenomorph. That could be bad for the crew.
Yeah.
And then the season will finish with the rest of the crew dead and only Gwyn surviving, and then blowing up the ship and escaping in a pod.
Oh, jeez. I wonder if there's a long-term evolution plan for Murph. Is there a plan eventually for Murph to speak or to become part of the crew?
Oh, that's a good one.
I kind of hope not. I like that they have a pet.
He's the ship's cat.
He is the ship's cat, exactly. He even had a cat bed. One thing that stood out to me this week is we kind of complained last week that they didn't use music as well as they have been.
Yeah.
But it was back this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when they had the triumphant moment when they landed the Protostar in front of the makeshift Enterprise, they were playing in the very sort of quietly, you could hear the theme song for Prodigy. So I thought it was better this week than it was last week. By the way, the theme song for Prodigy, I'm surprised how much it sticks in my head. I heard myself humming it this morning, and we had watched this yesterday a couple of times, so I wasn't watching it today, but it really sticks with me. I can hear it now in my head. So it's obviously a very effective theme, yeah.
They really did a good job with that, agreed.
Yeah.
Well, also for me, there is the new Star Trek cosplay costumes.
Yeah, the Frankenstein shirts.
Yep, those are pretty good.
But one of the very first things that stood out for me was I thought that they were going to do a Galaxy Quest type thing. And I guess in many ways they did. And of course, a lot of people talk about Galaxy Quest as being a Star Trek movie. I do not agree. It is not a Star Trek movie. I believe it is an homage to Star Trek, yes, but it is not a Star Trek movie.
It's like calling Kung Fu Panda a Kung Fu movie. No, it's an homage to Kung Fu movies. It's not a Kung Fu movie.
I mean, it's a great movie. I really enjoyed it, so I never say anything negative about it. It's just not a Star Trek movie.
Yeah.
So I guess that really did stand out for me as a real link to Galaxy Quest. And again, another thing, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but if you've never seen Galaxy Quest, you don't get those references.
Right. Yeah, and we've had feedback that other people get this as well.
Yeah.
Another thing that stood out is the importance of the Prime Directive and the risk of cultural contamination of less advanced races. I think what we saw here was a more positive version. Maybe it was actually good for this race to embrace the principles of Starfleet. It doesn't sound like they were that bad to start with, but maybe it fitted their worldview, so they kind of embraced it. But it could have very negative consequences for a less advanced race.
Well, it could be holding back their evolution in that if they're constantly waiting for Starflight to come and rescue them, then they're not working to rescue themselves or advance themselves. So it could just make them complacent.
That's a good point.
You know, it wasn't really showing something super negative, that it was doing to them, but it could be holding them back. And of course, also, it left a lot of pollution behind on their planet.
Well, that's the thing. Are they going to clean up that pollution?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a very good question. They were implying at the end that that's what they were doing. They just didn't show very much of it, right? They showed them just sealing off that cave, then leaving some medical supplies and getting out of there. But I hope they did try to clean up the pollution. Something like that can have such a lasting impact, either that or move them to a new location away from that pollution. So that, they can grow food and, and get away from...
Not be poisoned.
And not be poisoned, exactly. Things that could, for generations, impact them. And really, there weren't that many of them. I'm not sure how they can survive. We talked about this on one of the Deep Space Nine episodes, where if the group of people isn't diverse enough and large enough, right, it may not be able to survive over time.
Not enough genetic diversity.
Exactly. And this is not a very big crowd. And then we've poisoned their land at the same time. So hopefully they set them up for success.
The rest of their race died off because of the pollution.
Maybe they were a bigger group before. Oh, no, that's terrible.
We've really gone down the negative here, haven't we?
Oh, okay. All right. Let's move on. Let's move on to character development. And I do want to talk first about Jankum. It was so interesting in this episode because there were a number of times where he was like, no, I'm out of here. Like, he didn't want to go down to the planet. As soon as they saw something bad happening, he was like, okay, I got to get out of here. But then he was the one who did the brave thing to save the day because he believed in himself as an engineer. He just never believes in himself in those other situations. But when it comes to something that he's like, I have confidence in this, he risked his life, and he even said, hey, if I don't come back from this, be sure and give me, a royal funeral. So he knew it was a risk,
jumped on that
he jumped right in.
He's really got on that royalty bandwagon, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah, he has now a few times. He's brought that up. And then the other thing that I would say about character development is Dal continues to have imposter syndrome. And we have really used that in a number of episodes. And we certainly use it here because he feels like, oh man, we're doing the same thing that these people are doing. We are just dressing up in these uniforms, but we are not really Starfleet.
Well,
but yet he did the thing, which was, okay, they have been studying this. They know how the bridge works. They know how to take my orders. I can be the captain. And when he said, you just got to believe, although I joke that really, do you just want to believe in people who their only training is that they put on a play about it? But I just think that was him That was his development of being able to show, yeah, but I do believe in myself. I have been successful at this before. I know when we work together, we can accomplish something.
Yeah, I would agree. We're seeing this long road to Dal getting confidence in his abilities because he's not being completely self-centered. Yeah, watching Dal's journey really is one of the things that makes this show kind of fun and interesting to watch.
Oh, 100%, because in the beginning, nobody liked him. You know, the people who were watching it were like, this guy is not Star Trek. This doesn't make any sense. Why would I watch it? But he's the one he had the most to learn, and he is the one they are developing the most. But they're doing it in a sensitive way where he didn't go from being cocky about one thing to being cocky about something else. He's actually gone through a lot of things that have forced him to be humble. And now he's, learning to work with others. And the imposter syndrome is a very humanizing thing to everybody. So they've taken him on such an interesting journey that I was not confident was going to happen in the first couple of episodes.
Well, he started off as a jerky version of the Fresh Prince.
Yes, a purple Fresh Prince with a tail.
The character development I liked, even though it was really just a nod, was Gwyn saying about the importance of truth to her and not being afraid of it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the journey of Gwyn realizing that all her life had been a lie, that the diviner had fed her these lies, and the culmination of that in episode 10, learning all the truth. It's been a hard lesson for her over an extended period of time. So hearing her say that, I was like, oh, yeah, we know what that meant.
Yeah. Her lessons have definitely been the harshest.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I like that as a showing where the character is now.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it for character development. Let's move on to how this episode worked as a kid's show and hear from our 7-year-old kid correspondent, Mahi.
Hi, Mahi. What did you think of today's episode?
I liked the episode mostly. It's good to see Jankum getting braver and trying to prove that he is a good engineer. Rock Talk, as always, is so kind and cares about others. I am so glad Del Rey is feeling better after the strange disease. I did not like it when he was sick, and Zero wasn't able to figure out what was wrong. And the diviner seems to be getting his memories back, although I am not sure if he will tell the truth to Admiral Janeway.
No chance.
Also, the crew is continuing to help others, as I predicted, while finding a way to fix their ship and reach the Federation.
What did you think about the people of Enterprise?
I thought the people of Enterprise were funny. They believed that they were Starfleet, but got so many of the words and names wrong. They thought that the Protostar crew was actual Starfleet and were there to help. The people valued and followed the Federation principles to explore and learn more. I thought that was cool.
What do you think is happening to Murph?
I think Murph is going through a metamorphosis, just like a beautiful butterfly. Imagine how a caterpillar comes out of an egg laid by a butterfly, eats a lot of leaves, becomes a chrysalis, and soon pops out a beautiful, colorful butterfly. Almost impossible to imagine caterpillar having wings, but it happens in nature. I am waiting to see Murph turn into something colorful and cool.
Was there a lesson in this episode?
Yes, a few. Keep persistent in your search for a solution to a problem. If Rocktalk, Gwen, and Jankum had given up, they could not have saved Del Rey and the people of Enterprise from the disease. Never give up hope. The people of Enterprise did not give up hope to cure the disease for hundreds of years and waited for Starfleet to come back.
Thank you, Mahi.
Bye-bye.
Well, Mahi is definitely excited to see what Murph turns into.
Yeah, she definitely is. And I also like how, since the very beginning, what she's been focused on is how kind the crew members are to each other or the characters are to other people. And in the beginning, she did not like Dal either because he wasn't being kind. He was very focused on himself. But clearly that is something that she connects to and she appreciates in the story. And it's one of the things that she's predicted that they would do is go out and help others. And that's exactly what they are doing. So I imagine that lands pretty nicely for her. She did notice that the Enderpresians were just getting some words wrong. So she did relate to that. But, I know she hasn't watched the original series. I know she hasn't watched Galaxy Quest. I don't think that humor would be something for her yet. So it's just interesting to hear how she talks about it, because I believe that this episode it's very cute, but if you don't know any of those things that they're making fun of, I wasn't sure exactly what she was going to get from it. And I think the fact that she spent a long time, sort of explaining to us how a butterfly comes into being tells me that maybe she wasn't really into the things that were happening in this episode.
I guess if you don't have the baggage of the original series and say Galaxy Quest, it's a different episode because it becomes really just an episode about people who've been influenced by Starfleet and are emulating their behavior.
Yeah. There's some very deep concepts here, including poisoning the environment of the people on this planet, but also in poisoning and even stifling the development of the entire culture of this civilization.
Right.
And at the same time, we've got a lot of humor, but that humor is tied to things in TOS, things in Galaxy Quest, things that somebody who'd never watched those things or was very young and just couldn't relate to any of that, they're not going to get that.
Agreed.
So all they're left with really are those deep concepts, which might be a little bit too deep. So I guess what I'm saying is I feel like the things that were going on in this episode that were heavy were quite heavy. So I was worried that maybe this episode had some things that were too high level in concept, like the environmental and the cultural aspects. And then the humor was something that was not necessarily accessible to somebody like Mahi. Yeah. So I wondered where in the middle she would find the episode. So it was interesting that she said the lesson was in never giving up, which I do believe was part of it.
Never give up.
But then also
Never
she
surrender.
has this big excitement about Murph.
Yeah.
So did she pick up those big things? No, I don't think she did. But did that matter? Yeah, she seemed to enjoy it.
Interesting.
Well, let's move on then from How It Worked as a Kid show to some of our other feedback. And we can start with Wes Huntington on the Facebook group, who says, "Live logs improper. I loved this episode. I giggled at all the TOS references." Like all of us, yeah.
Cal E, very short one here, says, "Historical documents."
Cal E is a person of few words. We get very short messages.
I'm going to assume that this is a reference to Galaxy Quest and not that they got us mixed up with a history podcast.
Yeah, I'm assuming that. I asked on the Facebook group whether this episode was maybe not as accessible as previous episodes in terms of the humor was harder to grasp if you didn't know about TOS. And Brian from Talk Through Media responded, "That's probably true. It was definitely one that was TOS-centric. I did enjoy the Shatner-esque way that they were talking, though." Well, it was hard not to laugh at that, Brian. Yeah, I do agree with that.
It was a bit like a parody.
All right, now let's play our one piece of audio feedback from Jeff X-Force 11.
Well, hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff X-Force 11 leaving my feedback about Prodigy, All the World's a Stage. So this was a fun takeoff on the original Enterprise and a mission that we may have forgotten about or hadn't been written out into history, or just something new to the lore, and also a fun tale on the whole Galaxy Quest type of thing where people see something and try to emulate it and then it becomes a reality. I really enjoyed this episode, and it explains some things that they can't even communicate to Starfleet without the virus infecting things. I would assume this would be the same if they sent out a communications buoy, but that really makes it hard. If they can't communicate to Starfleet what's going on without risking Starfleet, I don't know how they're going to do it. Maybe they could write a message in a bottle, not electronically, but write it out and leave it for Starfleet, but even that might have some tech in it. I just don't know. but it does answer some questions. I'm really enjoying this episode and this part of the season so far. Those are my thoughts. X-Force is out.
Some good ideas from Jeff there.
Yeah.
I wonder if just using radio waves, like Star Trek The Motion Picture when they communicated with Vija, whether that would work, or maybe using Morse code.
Yeah, you got to go back to the analog ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe, really simple one, a giant toad banner, printed banner behind the ship that says, "Danger, we have a computer virus. We are not hostile."
Unclean. And they ring a bell. Stay away. Unclean.
Yeah, something that, a Starfleet ship could see.
I like the concept of a message in a bottle. If they had left that behind in all of the rubble of that comm relay station, if they'd written something out.
A giant banner.
Some graffiti on the debris, any kind of a message, I think would be very helpful. Maybe they'll think of that eventually.
Well, I hope so.
Before we move on from feedback, we did get some late feedback to last week's episode from Davia. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but this is on the Facebook group. And this is about Let Sleeping Borg Lie. And she says, "I'm glad Gwyn is not the weapon, but that living construct is scary, even if the Borg can't fight it." Very good point. Also love Zero and how they decided to sacrifice themselves if necessary, and also was so naive about the Borg. Yeah.
I think they were all very naive about the Borg.
Oh, they were incredibly naive about the Borg and put themselves into so much danger. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the trekkiness of this episode.
Well, the whole episode is a nod to TOS.
Yep.
Also a nod to the motion picture, where, remember, the probe was Vija, and it was really Voyager. Here we have the gallows, and it's Galileo.
Right.
So another Trek reference.
Yeah. And also, Ensign Garrovick was not a made-up character. That was a character from an episode called Obsession from the original series. And also the shuttle itself, Galileo, that came from maybe more than one original series episodes, but certainly from the episode Galileo 7. And because I want information, I decided to watch both of these episodes yesterday. And the episode Galileo 7 is not good. This is one of those episodes where you're like, oh, this does not hold up well. It's got this funny combination of sort of some good effects, like when they burn some fuel and in order to sort of send up a flare.
Yeah.
But then also they land on this planet, or they crash onto this planet that has these creatures on it. And these creatures are just people in big fuzzy costumes. I mean, that is very bad. There's a few other things in that episode that are bad. But the episode Obsession was quite good. I'm not sure I'd ever seen either one of these two, but I did enjoy Obsession. And there's no real connection to Garrovick and what happens in this episode, just the character itself.
Well, let's be honest about Obsession. It was not a good episode for red shirts.
Oh, no. We got rid of a lot of red shirts in that episode. Yeah, absolutely. But I would recommend watching it.
And I think my final trekkiness thing is, again, the impersonation of Kirk, Spock, Bones, Scotty, of course, Sulu and Uhura. All of them were present in this episode.
Yeah, because they were imitating their voices, not just having the names. We did have a supplemental log in this episode, not just the captain's log, so that was pretty Trekky.
Yeah, good point. And I think the final Trek thing is, again, the principles of Starfleet or Starflight. Also, the episode features the Prime Directive, and it reminds me of a more positive version of A Private Little War from the original series, where the Klingons were giving guns to a less advanced race. Well, they were giving all sorts of weapons technology to them.
Oh, I vaguely remember that episode. I did not watch that one last night, though. Maybe I need to watch that one today.
It's an early Prime Directive.
Okay. But also, to the point of the Prime Directive, in true Star Trek fashion, we fudge the Prime Directive rules a little bit because we like these people.
As you know, Second Contact is a little fuzzy. Janeway's words.
Well, yeah, and at least the interference didn't destroy the civilization yet anyway, but I do think it's holding them back.
Well, I think maybe that would be the thing to do with the Second Contact of the damage has been done. So the goal there would be to repair the damage as much as possible.
Yeah, because it was an accident.
People on a path.
Yeah,
yes.
I understand.
Yeah.
All right, I think that wraps up the Star Trekkiness section, so let's move on to rating. What do you give All the World's a Stage?
I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. It's a fun episode. It works great as a Star Trek episode. The characters are good. And you could read a lot into this episode. Like you said, is it about environmental damage? Is it about cultural contamination?
Yeah.
Is it about Starfleet?
Yep.
Their principles?
The imposter syndrome.
Yes. There's a lot to it. It's
Yeah.
a very enjoyable episode. I think in terms of rewatchability, I would watch it again.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. Yeah.
However, this could have been the first 11 out of 10 in the series had they gotten Carl Urban to do the voice of Bones.
Oh.
His interpretation of Bones in those movies was absolutely priceless. Fantastic.
Yeah. The only thing missing was the gold chains and the disco outfit from the motion picture.
Oh, yeah. Disco Bones. Yep. One of the greats.
Well, I don't know exactly what to give as a rating. The first time through the episode,
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy it as much. I was very focused on, it's just Galaxy Quest. And then it wasn't just Galaxy Quest. And then I was like, well, who's going to get this if they're new to Star Trek? Is this the right thing? But then, we took some time and I watched it again. And then I took the notes.
Right.
So I was paying a little bit more attention and doing more of an analysis of it. And then I actually liked it a lot more that second time through because I think I picked up on those other things, the high concept that we were talking about. But maybe more specifically, I was picking up again on one of the things I really like about this show, which is the working together and the believing in each other and how you get so much more out of each other when you act as a team. So my second time through, I liked it a lot. But I was also worried that Mahi wouldn't like it.
Yeah,
It doesn't sound like that happened, at least. She didn't dislike it. But I was worried that somebody really young would maybe just not be interested in this episode. But does every single episode have to be for that larger audience? I don't know. I don't make television shows. I would think the answer to that question is yes, it really should be for your audience all the time. But you also have to keep everybody else interested because you are trying to have a very broad interest group who watches the show. And this certainly covered a lot of bases. So there was a lot of good humor. I mean, we laughed at many things when we were watching it. And the imposter syndrome thing about it, I thought was pretty deep. I wish they had done a little bit more about the environmental concerns, about what they had done to their land. So I feel like I'm all over the place about this episode. So I can't give it a 10, but I also don't want to give it a super low rating. So I'm going to fall right in the middle. I'm going to give it a 7. I think I enjoyed it just a little bit more than I did the Borg episode. I did think there was a little bit more to it, but it didn't reach the heights of some of the earlier episodes for me. So I'm going to hedge my bets and give a 7.
I think it's impressive that an episode that relied a lot on the original series and of Star Trek lore actually found its feet with Mahi, who doesn't have that background.
Yeah, that's true. I think she just thought it was cute.
So that's quite an accomplishment from the writing perspective. And I suppose maybe with slightly older viewers that they may be encouraged to look at the older Star Treks.
Yeah, like Obsession. That was a pretty good episode.
Indeed.
Well, I think that wraps up Season 1, Episode 13. So come back next week for Episode 14. But before we wrap up, I want to let you know that James and I can always be reached on ReBingeIt at gmail.com, also on Twitter and Instagram at ReBingeIt.
And don't forget, you can listen to our Deep Space Nine podcast called ReBinge Deep Space Nine, available everywhere you get your podcasts, and on YouTube at ReBingeIt.
To contact us for Prodigy and even be a part of the show, if you'd like, you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. You can also leave audio and written feedback at talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, or you can simply email us at rebingeit@gmail.com. Lots of ways to get to us if you want to be part of the podcast, or if you just want to send us a message.
Well, that's it for this week. Come back next week to hear the ReBingeIt crew take on a new episode of Star Trek Prodigy.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.
Oh, and listen to Janeway.
And don't be a Borg.